Please be seated. It's the appointed time. We have a quorum. I thank members for attending this meeting. This is the panel on Home Affairs, Culture and Sports. There are 2 items on this agenda. We'll start with the housekeeping matters. First, information papers issued since the last meeting. An evaluation report of our Community Care Fund Assistance Program provided by the administration is being given to members by the Secretariat. You can find it on the agenda. 2 items for discussion at the next meeting. The next meeting will take place on Monday, 4:30, the 8th of May. The administration proposes 3 items for discussion. First, Capital Works Project, Joint User Complex at Tactical Road, Tune 1. 2, preparatory work for the 15th National Games. And 3, Capital Works Project, Quarry Park in Anderson Road Quarry. If members don't have any objections or questions, these will be the items for discussion. Next, proposed retention of 2 supernumerary directorate posts in the Sports and Recreation branch of the Culture, Sports and Tourism Bureau for the implementation of sports policy and the Kai Tak Sports Park project. Is paper CB bracket 2263 of 2023 bracket 03. We'll invite the administration to come in. Members, if you would like to speak, please press the request to speak button. Secretary, ready when you are. We submit a paper on the proposed retention of 2 posts. One is government architect, designated as a project director for 1 year and 6 months from the 1st of January 2022 to the 30th of June 2025. The second one is a permanent assistant secretary, sports and recreation for 2 years from the 1st of January next year to the 31st of December 2025. Starting from 2017, the government has allocated over $60 billion to promote sports in Hong Kong in terms of elite sports as well as popularization. For Kai Tak Sports Park, it will cost $31.9 billion and 28 hectares. It will provide facilities for international and local sports events, as well as for the use of the community. The director will be in charge of Kai Tak Sports unit. The person will lead a professional team in the design and build of the project. Before the commissioning of the facility, the post will have to complete a large amount of work, say for example, supervising work progress, test acceptance, expenditure, construction, work safety, environmental protection standards, performance of contracted parties, statutory tests for fire service installations, and obtaining of relevant certificates. As it is a large project and is very important, we are at the critical stage of construction. In order to ensure that it will complete before the end of 2024, we need someone with sufficient experience in leading projects and managing government contracts to continue to supervise remaining work and follow-up tasks of Kai Tak Sports Park. The main facilities will be commissioned by phases before the end of 2024. There will also be snagging work and a number of other types of work. We propose to extend the post by 1 year and 2 months to the end of June 2025. For PAS, SR2 is in charge of the Sports and Recreation Division 2. Main duties include the operation of the Kai Tak Sports Park, and it will set down the main governance structure to supervise work, planning work, and to supervise land issues relating to sports and recreation, including private recreation leases, grounds leases. and they will also support the work of the major sports event, the M-mark system, as well as the matching scheme of major sports events, as well as to supervise the management of the Sir David Trench Fund for Recreation. So in the coming 2 years, we need this directorate post to lead SR Division 2. For the Kai Tak Sports Park, from design, construction to commissioning, as well as the work of the private recreation ground lease, these are important tasks, so we propose to retain this post for 2 years, from the 1st of January 2024 to the 31st of December 2025. With members' support, we will retain these 2 important and necessary supernumerary posts. We will go to the Establishment Subcommittee under the Finance Committee for endorsement. With members' support, we will make the application to the Finance Committee. Thank you. We have 5 members who would like to speak: Mr. Benson Look, Dr. So Chiang Wing, Mr. Adrian Ho, Mr. Kenneth Lau, and myself. If you would like to speak, please press the Request to Speak button. Mr. Look. According to the administration's paper, I learned that the construction of the Kai Tak Sports Park is delayed. Of course, it's a force majeure in the form of COVID-19. In terms of building materials, in particular steel, it's put in use in significant amount in the main stadium. So a delay is something that we can't help with. For paragraph 6, well, these main facilities will be completed by phases before the end of 2024, and Hong Kong will be in charge of some of the events of the National Games in 2025. But since we now have a chance to host some events of the National Games, it is a very important opportunity. It can showcase our ability to host major events. It is also our responsibility towards national events. If there is any hiccup in terms of the Kai Tak Sports Park, for the PAS, I think the head will either roll or there will be a demotion. Well, apart from the main stadium that can carry 50,000 spectators, there are also other facilities, say indoor facilities and ball courts for the use of the public. For the main stadium, it will be commissioned at around the same time. What about other ancillary facilities that can be commissioned before that for the use of the public? The second point. According to paragraph 12, that is the post of PAS, the duties. One of the duties is to set up a high-level advisory committee. As you know, that for the sports park is design, build, and manage and operate. So this post is important. When the park is commissioned, is there a need to retain this post? Secretary, I'll answer the first question. For the others, I will defer to the Commissioner for Sports. There are 3 main facilities in the sports park. There is the main stadium and also a 5,000-seat public sports ground, and another facility that is indoor that can house 10,000 spectators. Given the current progress, for the 5,000 people facility will be completed. For the other indoor sports center, it will be completed in the middle of next year. We'll try to expedite it, but it's still a construction site. The sports grounds may be commissioned. We will arrange for games to take place. But when it comes to events open to the general public, we will need to consider whether it is suitable. The most important thing is to complete the work according to schedule. We of course would like to make good use of the facilities and not want to see it laying idle there. For the other questions, I'll defer to the Commissioner. The High-Level Advisory Committee is expected to be set up a year before the formal commissioning of the sports park. It will comprise of representatives of different sectors, including the sports sector. They will give the government advice about the operation of the sports park. This committee is very important. We think there is a need to keep this committee to work with the government on the supervision of the operation of the sports park. You ask whether there is a need to retain these two posts. We think that when the construction completes, we will see whether there is a need for the project director to be retained. Of course, we will keep in view the situation. Regarding PAS 2, the sports park will be commissioned for 20 years, and there are many other duties, including lease management, that will continue. We will consider the situation and get back to this panel if necessary. Next, Mr. Su Cheng-Wing. Thank you. I strongly support the retention of these two posts because it's a significant project. If we do not give you the green light, I don't know what will happen. But I have some things to ask the Secretary. On the 2nd of July 2021, according to information paper, the LegCo gave an approval for the retention of the two posts. At that time, you undertook that on the 31st of December 2023, everything will be completed. That's why it was extended to the end of this year. Well, apparently, it doesn't work. You said the reason is COVID-19. But when you made that application, it was in the midst of the epidemic in 2021. You have indeed taken that into consideration. How come? Now you ask for an extension. I want to know what measures you have. Do you have any KPI for the project director to ensure that everything will be completed according to schedule? One of the duties of the PAS is the policy relating to the sports park. Just now, the Secretary talked about operation of 20 years. Well, the period of retention is a difference of 6 months between the two posts. If the PAS is to be in charge of operation, how come you only ask for another 6 months? In July 2021, when we made the application, well, please bear in mind that the epidemic started at the end of 2020. The impact on material is at the end of 2020 and the beginning of 2021. When we sought funding support in 2021, we could see some signs, but we could not assess the impact. So we decided to go ahead because the two posts were to end. What we could do was to make use of the information at hand to ask for an extension. Now we are aware of the full impact of the epidemic on the construction. We have conducted the latest assessment, and I've already told you what our latest assessment on completion is. We've spoken to the contractors. We're still confident about the current schedule. In 2025, we have to host some events of the national games. So we have to make sure that the Kai-Tak Sports Park will be completed in time. And that itself is an important indicator for everyone, myself, the project director, for the commissioner. And we all follow this important indicator. We're all responsible. We are confident. But of course, if there are factors that is out of our control, we'll come back to you as soon as possible, and we will find a solution no matter what. In terms of the posts, as the Commissioner explained, we need another 6 months to complete calculations, taking over of the facilities after project commission. But there is still a lot of work to do after project construction. Say, for example, operation of the facility, supervision of the operation. That's why we asked for another 6 months for the PAS. We will see how much input is required by the government and what additional work we need. After 6 months, we will be able to decide whether the PAS is to be made as a permanent post or not, or whether we need to further extend it. We will make an assessment then.
Check.
Next, Mr. Adrian Ho. What I want to ask has 2 parts to it. 1, I agree that the government has a team to oversee the operations of Kai-Tak so that it can meet the demands of Hong Kong. As for PAS Sports and Recreation 2, for the 5-year plan to upgrade football pitches, the work's progress. So in this year, next year, or 2025, how many improvement works projects are there specifically, and what are they? How long, when will they be completed? Also, for 5-a-side soccer pitches are getting more popular in the world these days. Regarding the maintenance for such facilities, what are your plans? Apart from holding football competitions for different age groups, can Hong Kong host perhaps international small-scale football events? Perhaps I'll let Commissioner for Sports answer that question. Thank you, Chair. Regarding the upgrading of football pitches, we are planning to upgrade 70 football pitches. Up to March of this year, approximately 40 projects have begun. They would include returfing of 5-a-side football pitches. We'll also have changed the boundaries of 7-a-side football pitches. We've also done some conversion. We've also transformed soccer pitches for 15 people to amend the boundaries to make sure they conform to the standards of 11 people football pitches. So such works have begun. As for 5-a-side football, the development of such sport, we believe we should promote this sport. The things we are doing include the 5-year plan on the upgrading of football pitches, because with the upgraded football pitches, we can promote the sport. The second thing is the Hong Kong Football Association has been given additional subsidies on that. With additional subsidies, we hope that the Football Association can promote five-a-side football. With regard to training with the coaches, we've also want the support of it strengthened. Also, in the policy address, the chief executive announced that the government will promote sports that can be done in the city. There are 5 events. In particular, there are 3 people: basketball, breakdancing, sport climbing, skateboarding, and five-a-side soccer. In our scheme to promote such sports, we will also provide subsidies for schools to give training classes to youngsters to learn about these urban sports, especially five-a-side soccer, so that more people will want to play that sport. And students can start training earlier in such sport. We have also received support from the schools of federations. For example, for 9-a-side football, they have changed the system to support five-a-side soccer so that for younger students, they can adapt to this formal setting of football competitions. I believe that can raise our level in five-a-side soccer in Hong Kong. Chair, I do support the 2 posts being retained, even though they applied for a retention in 2021 already. As we're approaching a key stage of the construction of Kai Tak Park, it is understandable that the government is applying for a retention again. I do hope that the project can be completed in time in 2024 and host the events of national games in 2025. For the post of PASSR2, it is to provide input in the operation of Kai Tak Sports Park so that it can transition smoothly into operations. That's why I believe there is the need to retain this post. I have questions, however, Chair. For PASSR2, the main duties would include, apart from the operation of Kai Tak Sports Park, he or she would also handle land matters including private recreational leases, as well as the administration of MWAC system, etc. Most of such work is continuous. Since the supernumerary post has been retained 3 times, I see that there is the need to have this position in the long term. So will the government extend it for another 2 years? Is it 2-year period enough? How is the work going to be handed over to other positions if they do not plan to retain the position? What Mr. Kenneth Lau said is quite correct. After the Kai Tak Sports Park project is completed, we have to conduct an assessment, because right now, with the liaison and overseeing the operations, after a certain period of time that it has commenced operations, we can have a better picture of how it's going to operate. Right now, the colleague in this post has taken up certain parts, certain duties like such, but whether such workload warrant a permanent post, we will have to conduct an assessment then. So right now, we just want to extend the post for another 2 years. After that, we will have a better picture to see whether it's still a time-limited post, or if need be, we'll come back here to see if it can be converted to a permanent post, etc. So are you confident that it can be completed within 2 years? Chair, I believe this is something that we have to get done within the period of time. But of course, we are confident about the overall situation right now. But if anything uncontrollable, out of control, that's going to happen, I don't know. So, thank you. From what I understand, most members are quite concerned about whether the completion of Kai Tak Sports Park can be constructed in time. I do understand that concern. As most people know, the national games would take place in 25, and many members hope that the Kai Tak Sports Park can be completed in time for that. But actually, during the past weekend, Hong Kong Sevens was held successfully. Many overseas tourists came here for that. So I believe there's the need to continue to host major sports events in the city. So apart from the national games, I believe the Kai Tak Sports Park can perhaps host the Hong Kong Sevens in the stadium in Kai Tak. So that can really tell the good story of Hong Kong, because a major infrastructure like such can host such large-scale event. I would like to tell the Secretary about something about Hong Kong Sevens, during which children were asked to go around the stadium, and it is shown that many children are interested in playing rugby. And it also shows the world that many in Hong Kong are interested in playing the sport. So I believe more resources can be deployed in this sport. So I want the Secretary to tell me about the Kai Tak Sports Park's ability in hosting major sports events. I'll let the Commissioner for Sports answer the second question later. For the first question, we have been talking to Kai Tak Sports Park to see if the Hong Kong Sevens in 2025 can be hosted there. But right now we're fleshing out the details. It would depend on the progress of the discussions. If it is possible, we definitely wanted to do it there, because we can test out the facilities in 2025 to make sure operations are smooth when we're hosting national games as well at the end of the year. As Mr. Charles said, it can display to the world our ability to build world-class infrastructure. As for rugby, I'll let the Commissioner talk about that. We've achieved great results in rugby earlier. We've talked to Rugby Union before regarding Hong Kong Sevens. We've achieved great results for the past years. There's a key element in that. So not only a lot of people in Hong Kong could see that the sport is quite spectacular, much resources have also been deployed. So we think the Rugby Union has been doing well. They have used much of their resources in promotion in schools for training with coaches. They have achieved great results. They have also promoted sport to disabled persons. So the government's perspective is that because they are working on that actively, we would like to provide more support for them. For example, for temporary leases, we have provided policy support so that they will have facilities to promote the sport. So we have a good working relationship with the Rugby Union, and we would like to praise the efforts of the union. Thank you.
Mr. Chen Yong, thank you. Well, the electrical is very sensitive when it comes to creation of posts. But as we've heard, the Kai Tak Sports Park is very important. The national game is a good chance for us to make a name after the epidemic. Well, as Mr. John Lee said, that we adopt a result-oriented approach. I suggest that, well, as the post will be leading a team of civil servants, they should be able to foresee difficulties and work out plans to avoid that. Of course, other than the two posts, we also have the secretary, under-secretary, and permanent secretaries as well, because they're all of the same team. And what we like to see is that the projects will be completed before schedule, because we've seen too many occasions when projects encounter many difficulties. Whereas we can see that when an event is done right, it will have great effects like the Hong Kong Sevens. But where there are problems, people will hear about it. So when it comes to the design and the workflow, please try to foresee difficulties, preempt these difficulties. You have to make sure that everything is in place. Say, for example, fire service installations, they may never be used, but they have to be there. You have worked out the expenditure. I would ask that you make a very good estimate instead of coming to ask for supplementary funding. I think if you come to us to ask for supplementary funding, it will be more difficult than asking for a bigger sum in the first place. Secretary, I thank Mr. Chen for his comments, and we fully agree with that. Of course, we have reviewed all the processes. If anything can be expedited, they will be. We also have a very stringent control on cost. But if we ask them to work overtime to expedite the process, then it means a higher cost. We will strike a balance. To be honest, we cannot afford a delay. However, we cannot give you an undertaking. But from where I stand, I don't see any reasons why this project cannot be completed before the end of 2024. But of course, we will keep an eye on everything. The member talked about different risks. Of course, we will make a better assessment of risks. And that is something that we take into account. Say, for example, crowd control, how we deal with people overcrowding unnecessarily. I'll defer to the Commissioner. I thank Mr. Chen for his reminder. Let me give you an example. Our project team and the contractor has a very good rapport. COVID-19 posed a lot of difficulties. Our project team and the contractors make use of different ways to catch up. We're still confident that the project will be completed before the end of next year because we've already done a lot of work behind the scene. Back to the example I talked about. Say, when it comes to testing and acceptance of fire service installations, there is a special arrangement. Unlike what we have done before, that everything's installed and then we will make arrangements, we have already liaised with the high echelon of the fire services department to tell them that that there will be a specific design of the fire fire service installations, and we sought their views. So their views will have been taken into account at the design stage. We try to do what we can as soon as possible, but of course we'll bear your comments in mind. Mr. Yu Pak Leung. Well, under the sports and recreation branch under the Bureau, you ask for retention of 2 posts. I do understand the reason and I do see the need. You ask for an extension of 1.5 years for the project director and 2 years for the permanent assistant secretary. I can see that you're trying to control cost as much as possible. We all want to see the early commissioning of the Kai Tak Sports Park. The sports park is an important sports facility. It will be a new landmark and a new tourist attraction. Can you give us some information about more elements in terms of tourism? For Longchun Bridge, it's right next to the Kai Tak Sports Park. I think the project will be completed in 2024. At the tip of the runway, there is a cruise terminal. So for the entire Kowloon City district, there are heritage elements, cultural and recreation elements, and tourism as well. So I am interested in relation to the integrated development of culture, sports, and tourism. Are there duties of the PAS that's related in this respect? Regarding the facilities, there is one that seats 50,000. There is another 10,000 seating facilities, and another one that seats 5,000. I believe that they will be completed by phases. Will you open them up at the same time, or do it by phases when it comes to opening these facilities for use? I'll start with the second question because it was touched on earlier. For the public sports ground, that seats 5,000. The project will complete at the end of this year. For the indoor sports facility, the middle of next year. For the main arena or the main stadium, that will be later. We will arrange events of a certain scale because the site itself is still a construction site. We will have to wait and see whether we can open them for the public. But as long as we can open these facilities safely to the public, we would aim to do it. For some sports events, it can be done more easily because we can transport athletes into the venue quite in groups. So we will take that into account and we'll try to do it as much as possible, and we will commission these facilities in phases. The member's right in relation to tourism, of course, whenever there are major facilities, we will look at it in a comprehensive way. A major task of the Bureau is to coordinate the different areas. We will, from the perspective of tourism, how to link up these different attractions. It will be done from the perspective of tourism, so not necessarily under the lead of the PAS. But if there is any assistance required, any addition of facilities, then it will be done by the team led by the PAS. Next, Mr. Andrew Lam. Thank you. 2 questions. A minor one first. I understand that the park will be done by way of design, build, and operate. I hope that it will be commissioned as soon as possible. In February 2019, it was the 1st of February. Well, it says that it would take 54 months. The last facility will be completed at the end of next year. So apart from the national games, there should be other events, sports events or cultural events that are in the pipeline. So what are your preparations? So apart from the national games, who is in charge of these events? The operator? If you have any plans, can you give us more information? Or the contract states that it should be completed within 54 months. But from past papers, it says that there will be a charge of 4.3 million per day if there is any delay. So if it's delayed by 1 year, it's close to $1.6 billion, which is a significant amount. I'm not going to go into the detail about compensation, but I have some things to ask. In principle, I support the retention of the 2 posts. But what about financial control? What's the difference between these 2 posts? When will you give us the figures in terms of expenditure? I'll defer to the Commissioner first. For the mega events in the pipeline, in the design of the contract, the contractor will build and operate the venue. Basically, it's for the operator, that is the company, to attract different events and programs to use the sports park. Under the contract, we require that there will be a certain number of sports events. That itself is very important. Say for the main stadium, they may make a bigger profit for concerts. We don't stop them from doing that, but we require that at least, say for example, 40 days of a year are to be devoted to sports events. For the other days, it's at the discretion of the operator. In short, it's the operator that is in charge of the program, but we work closely with them. Say for M-Mark events, we're working with the sports corporation, whether by 2025 the sevens will take place there, or whether other events will take place there. We've already started a discussion, and the company's in close discussion with us. And of course, the priority is given to sports events. In relation to the liquidity damage, the charge per day is not a small amount, because it will give a strong incentive for the contractor to complete. Now we have experienced delay as a result of COVID, and these are extension of time allowed under the contract. Well, we also take into account rainy season, and there are extensions allowed under the contract. We have already handled the impact of the first 4 waves, and the relating extension of time is about 122 days. there is still the impact of the fifth wave and rainy seasons. Well, I think it's down to when the liquidated damages start to count. Well, when it comes to the figures of the construction, is under the purview of the project director. For the PAS, it's more to do with the operation. When will you be able to close the account and give us all the figures? For the project, we'll be able to wrap up all the figures a year or year and a half after the completion of the project. So it's about 2026. I'm afraid I won't be here by then.
好，咁住就
All right, next it's my question. I do support the retention of the two posts, the project director and the PAS. Again, we would like to closely monitor the situation if possible, if it can be commissioned as soon as possible for the public. I believe it is beneficial because many sports events can be held there as well. So that is again very beneficial to have it sports park open as soon as possible. Also, I don't understand why this PAS post has to be supernumerary. For culture division and sports division, I see there are less people in sports division, but when looking at the duties, they are doing a lot apart from sports. They are also looking at the recreational facilities. There's also a 5-year plan for recreational facilities. All the private recreational leases and mark events, they are all under the sports division. You said that this year there are over 20 mark events to be hosted. When there are that many mark events, when you have to integrate culture and sports, it's going to be different from before. For example, for the rugby event, you want to promote overseas. You want to see how it can be integrated with culture and tourism. Why is this post still supernumerary? Should it be a permanent post instead? So that is my first question. Next. PS2 would also have to handle the administration of the MMARC system. Again, I would like to congratulate the Bureau on successfully hosting the sevens. I believe the Standard Chartered Marathon is also, and the Golf Open are also MMARC events. Can we have perhaps more organizations host events so that more overseas tourists would be here to see the events? I'll let the commissioner answer the next question later. I'll first answer the question. As you may understand, there is a heavy workload with regard to sports. We have a shortage. We are very tight on manpower. If we have to turn this into a permanent post, we are worried that people may ask, do you really need someone to do such work? Because these are only 5-year or 10-year plans. What is going to happen after that? Is there such workload to warrant a permanent post? We are worried that we may not be able to convince people on that being a permanent work. So after 2 years, and that colleague in the post has been working on it for at least 6 months, they can assess whether the workload really warrants such a permanent post. Also, they will have to look at after renewing the contracts, when the contracts will be renewed again. So it is a heavy workload indeed. without someone in this post, we will not be handled workload. So we want to be responsible and see for 2 years what's going to happen after 2 years and to see whether we will conduct an assessment then. As for the MMARC system, we would definitely want to encourage more event organizers to organize such events, host such events in Hong Kong. We would have some enhancement measures to MMARC system. Therefore, there are 2 areas that I would like to highlight. The subsidized amount will be increased from $10 million to $15 million for each event. It is so that event organizers can make the events more larger in scale. Also, before only the Hong Kong Sports Committee can apply for that, we have relaxed that threshold so that we can develop sports as an industry. So certain companies can also apply for this MMARC scheme. We will assess the merits of the events that they propose, but we do hope to host more international events in Hong Kong. Well, Secretary, I hope you can think about it because there is a heavy workload for the sports division because they have to liaise with stakeholders. I hope that you can think about whether this post is really needed in the long term to handle that workload. Well, thank you, Secretary. I think that's it for this item. I believe we would support the retention of these 2 posts. Okay, the next agenda item. Thank you, Secretary. Thank you. Next. Oops, sorry. Wait. Government's efforts on facilitating building management and proposed recreation of a supernumerary directorate post in the Home Affairs Department. Well, the LC papers have been circulated to members and will let representatives from the department and bureau take a seat when you're ready, Secretary. And also, colleagues, if you wish to speak, please press the request to speak button. Chair, members, my colleagues from the Home Affairs Department and I would like to report government's efforts on facilitating building management, including the review of Chapter 344 of the Building Management Ordinance, also the proposed recreation of a supernumerary directorate post in the Home Affairs Department. The government has all along been a facilitator. Apart from encouraging residents' organizations, there is also promotion of awareness of owners in building management ordinance. Support services have also been provided to owners. Also, with Chapter 626, licensing regime for the property management sector has been implemented in August 2021 and will be fully implemented in August of this year. With the support, owners can properly manage buildings. They will also regulate the responsibilities of building management, and the building management ordinance has provided a framework for owners corporations to form. There is also public consultation has been in 2017 to 2022. There has been legislative proposals. We have made legislative proposals because it covers a wide range of issues. the 4 areas that are of considerable public interest that are less controversial will be covered first. That would include large-scale maintenance projects, procurement in general, keeping of minutes, financial statements, and criminal sanctions. Additional restrictions will be posed, and financial statements requirements will be. It will also enhance responsibility of. We will also tender documents. We will also impose criminal sanctions for not improper keeping of documents. 14 engagement sessions have been conducted. We have met with political parties, property management sector to deal with the issue. Amendments have been made, and we will brief members on the document in future. We believe that it is very complicated with the topics. We have to strike a balance between the issues. We hope that in this year we can submit the draft bill to the Legislative Council. We will also have legislative amendment proposals in future. We wish to deal with the more controversial topics later. As the licensing regime is to be implemented later, we will work with the property management companies to see how we can properly manage buildings. We will also listen to views of stakeholders to see how we can follow up on the issues. Also, with regard to the proposed recreation of a supernumerary post, from the date of effective to the 6th to 31st of March 2026, they will follow up on proposals not covered in the draft bill. They will also be in charge of care teams, the operations, and they will formulate the way forward. We welcome members' comments, and we hope that members can support the recreation of a supernumerary post. If members agree, we will submit the proposal to the Establishment Subcommittee for endorsement in future in this year. Well, the PowerPoint, we've actually talked to members earlier about this. Perhaps we can be a bit more brief with that. Upon discussions with members, we have made minor amendments. We would like the Deputy Commissioner to work on that. Thank you.
The amendment to CAF 344 will cover 4 other major areas: large-scale maintenance projects, keeping of minutes, accounts and financial statements, criminal sanctions. And these 4 areas are of concern to owners. We propose to introduce a concept of large-scale maintenance projects. According to the result of the public consultation, we will use the number of units as well as the percentage of expenditure as the definition. Say, for example, under the 2017 discussion, well, if it is 30% of the annual expenditure, it will be account for a building of 2,001 units. It will be large scale. Of course, it will take into account various situations and to make sure that there is smooth operation. As the Secretary has said, we have been talking to stakeholders, and there are views saying that the amount stated on the PowerPoint slide is too narrow, so it's very easy to fall into the category of large-scale maintenance projects. We have actually drawn reference to the project cost of the building rehabilitation schemes of URA. We find that for each unit, they usually have to show about $30,000. So we make use of this and use it as the basis of the definition of a large-scale maintenance projects, that is at $30,000 contributed per unit. We would also like to make use of this opportunity to enhance transparency. According to public consultation results, we consider to make changes For the quorum, it will be increased from 10% to 20%. We will also introduce in-person voting requirements. That is about 10% of the owners of 400 owners. We have been talking to stakeholders. There are views saying that the threshold raising to 20% as a quorum will result in implementation difficulties. And the introduction of the voting in person, it is worth considering, but it has to be like 5% of the owners or 200 owners, because this will enhance participation of owners. In terms of minutes of meeting, in order to enhance transparency, we also propose that the number of voting in person by owners and voting by proxy will have to be recorded in a minute. In relation to minutes notification and distribution of minutes, we propose that there is an important reminder in the notification or the notice setting out the estimated amount to be contributed by each owner. In relation to minutes of meeting, well, we require that the minutes will have to be displayed at a prominent place within 28 days, and the copies will have to be delivered to owners as well. In relation to general procurement, these are our proposals. First, whether a tender is required. The current legislation requires that it's 20% of annual budget. We propose that it will be changed to average annual audited expenditure for the past 3 financial years to avoid people making use of the loophole to circumvent it. In relation to declaration of interest, we require that there will be a mandatory declaration by deed of mutual covenant manager or property management companies. In relation to audited requirements, well, currently, if a building has more than 50 units, there is an audit requirement. We want to better protect owners, so we propose to change it to an annual income or budget that is likely to be more than $500,000. In relation to display of financial statements, the current requirements is that it is to be laid in a general meeting. But now we propose that as soon as it's available, it will have to be displayed at a prominent place. In terms of sanctions, we propose criminal sanctions in relation to failure of keeping of minutes, tender documents, and proxy instruments. Upon conviction, every member would be liable to a fine at a level 4. We have spoken to various stakeholders in terms of the sanctions. There are views saying that the deterrent effect should be enhanced, so the penalty should be increased. However, some think that if the penalty is too high, it would deter people from joining as a member of the owners' corporation. We decide to maintain our original proposal. Under Cap 626, well, the authority has formulated a code of practice, saying that certain requirements have to be met. If there is any failure, there can be investigation or disciplinary hearings by the authority. In relation to our amendments, we propose that all these will be incorporated in Schedule 7 to cover buildings with a deed of mutual covenant, DMC. There are also other proposals. They are in relation to appointment of proxies as well as the power of the authority. There are views saying that the threshold for invoking the power is too high. Say, for example, that the building is not managed or the owners are put in a hazardous situation. But there are views saying that these buildings are actually private properties. The authority should not interfere without good reasons. A more appropriate approach is to use mediation service to resolve disputes. In relation to this topic, we will consider it cautiously. In relation to proxy instruments, some stakeholders say that some of the proposals are infeasible. Say, for example, double-locked requirements and the requirement to place the collection box of proxy instruments in a prominent place because some buildings don't have a lobby. And some people think that the procedures are too complicated. Say, for example, clear statement, countersigning, and another statement made. It's not easily done. So we will see how we can make better use of the professional knowledge of licensed property management companies. Depending on members' views, we'll continue to follow up on the legislative work. We aim to introduce the bill within this legislative year. 4 members would like to speak. They are Michael Tan, Andrew Lam, Mr. Chen Yong, and myself. 5 minutes, please. How long? 5 minutes each. We have had a lot of adverse coverage by the press in relation to management, building management, bid rigging, corruption, and there was this arrest of 49 people that involves bid rigging of about $500 million, and the chairperson of the Owners Corporation was arrested as well. I do think the relevant rules and regulations have been seriously outdated. A review should have taken place yesterday. We need a dedicated unit to do this, however. I have very high expectations. Experience told us that the major reason for these problems is because people are allowed to make use of proxy without good reason. However, this time round, we don't see much amendments relating to proxies. Very often, for management matters, small owners are not really concerned about it. They're approached by some people they know, asking them to sign a proxy. So they sign these proxy instruments without selecting any of the options. And they don't even know what's going on. So it's completely unregulated. But I don't agree that the proxy should be dispensed with, because very often you don't have a quorum. So you do need to make sure that there is a system to verify the authenticity of proxies so that it will not be abused. The most effective way is to get the management company involved, give them a new duty, require them to check every proxy that has been submitted to them. So it has to be signed with the witness of the management company, stating that the proxy undertakes to do specific duties. If owners don't know what is the main discussion of the meeting, then the management company will have to explain to these owners. And the district office or the Home Affairs Department will have to conduct checks of these proxy instruments. In the past 3 years, some owners' corporations have said that because of the epidemic, there is no need to call meetings, so no reports. But now, under your amendment, you said that, whether there is a meeting called, as soon as the financial statement is prepared, it should be displayed. But how do you ensure that members make the excuse of the report, the statements is yet to be completed? So you do need to set a deadline, say 3 months. It's unreasonable for the statement not to be available 3 months after the end of the financial year. If you need more time, then make an application. And there is also this minor point. And you talk about the definition of large-scale maintenance project. But what if someone breaks up that project to avoid that threshold? Well, these are my expectations of the new post. And I think the most important thing is to strike the right balance in relation to the proxy instrument. Secretary, I thank Mr. Tian for his support. First, about proxies. We do agree that there needs to be further management of proxy instruments, but it will be done at the next stage. As you understand that this proposal covers many different types of buildings, standalone buildings or complexes. They may not have owners' corporations, but we'll talk to management companies about guidelines and practices. We make use of these management companies to better manage or deal with proxies. We've been talking to to management companies. 75% of these buildings are covered by management companies, and with their help, some issues can be resolved. In relation to financial statements and large-scale projects, well, there are definitions under the current legislation. Well, the excuse is that when there is no meeting, the financial statement, whether it's completed or not, doesn't have to be made available. Well, do I have more time? Yes. Well, under Section 27, bracket 1, there are requirements saying that the financial statement will have to be laid in a meeting, and there is a timeline, but because of the epidemic, where annual meetings cannot be called, and that's why in some instances there is no meeting called after 15 plus 3 months. But you now ask for these statements to be displayed to enhance transparency. Just now, you mentioned that there are buildings without management companies or owners' corporations, but there are many more with both. So can you get the management companies involved and require them to do it? Thank you, Mr. Tien. It is exactly the line we're considering. It's for the management company to handle that because they have the duty to assist owners to comply with CAP 344 and to properly manage the building. A more practical way is to get the companies involved to assist owners, and that is along the same line as what we have in mind. Mr. Andrew Lam. First, a good word for the Secretary and her team. They have shown us the determination to deal with this issue. We're aware of the challenges of this issue. But this is to protect the rights of owners, especially small owners. And if we have to improve building management, there are challenges. Well, I might admire your determination, but I am not optimistic that you can get it done. And that's exactly this reason that I think it should be done by phases. So I do support that you recreate this post. In relation to the details of the legislative amendments, we have already exchanged views. I think that regarding the direction, if we are to completely resolve building management issues, then we do need to consider very carefully. In terms of old districts, and there may be problems with old building or old districts, or problems with the way the DMCs are worded in some complexes. As mentioned, this is a very controversial area. Band-aid approaches will not improve the situation. Anyway, I support the recreation of the post. Thank you. When it comes to building management or property management, you might have read a lot of different stories from the news. There are many different situations. It is indeed a great challenge. But I thank members for your support and your encouragement. Our team is determined to do it well. We need your support. We need the support of different quarters of our society. We've conducted one round of consultation. It was tiring, but it proved to be very useful. We've collected very good comments and views from all these exchanges, and they're very helpful in our work. We may not be able to deal with the heart of the problem, but we do agree that we need to map out a new way. When we were talking about amendment of the building management ordinance, there was no licensing regime, but now these companies are operating in a professional way. Do we need to take a new direction in building management for the ultimate aim to protect small owners, to protect them from bid rigging, from corruption in maintenance projects, and to ensure quality management on a day-to-day basis? So we do need new mentality. We should not just look at how to amend TAP 344. As I said, it's a challenge, and I hope that members at different sectors, especially the industry, will support us. We all need to work together and to do it well. As I said at the outset, it's not just about recreating this post. We aim at setting up a review working group. We want to solicit more views to see how we can, in a more pragmatic way, handle it.
係，多謝主席。
Mr. Chen Yung, thank you, Chair, thank you, Secretary. I would agree with what Mr. Lam said about creating a post for facilitating building management. I think this is a very challenging post. I believe the Secretary has dealt with a lot of these before. They have a heavy workload, and many people may not understand how hard it is. So we do support the direction the department and the Bureau is taking. If it's not public money, I would want at least 2 posts to handle the workload. Well, I do have 2 suggestions regarding 3 new buildings. Can we have like a collective management of 3 new buildings through legislation? Or have, for large-scale management companies, they're willing to take up collective management for multiple 3 new buildings. If they can be managed collectively, I believe that can be beneficial. So because it's the same for us. If we are fragmented, it's hard to deal with them. So if you can manage them collectively, you would be beneficial, and is beneficial for the interests of small homeowners. Also, with regard to false proxies, which has happened before quite often, we will have to deal with that. Also, with the panel of advisors, I do have to praise the government's efforts. I've heard many times that citizens have positive feedback about that scheme. So can you perhaps deploy more resources on this scheme to help small homeowners get support from the panel of advisors? Also, I want to say that for public rental housing estates, TPS estates, excuse me, you would let them make decisions, but certain people would try to worm their way into the groups to give their own agenda. But you have to tell small owners about such risks, because when there are problems, they may blame the government. So these are my suggestions. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chen Yung. Regarding the management of 3 new buildings, there are many challenges we face with the management of such buildings. Apart from helping owners of three new buildings form owners corporations, we would hope to engage management companies to manage the buildings. However, in future, we would like to take the direction that for these three new buildings, we would want innovative ways to help manage these three new buildings. For those who have engaged management companies already, what we can do for them. So we would want to think about these in future. As for bid rigging or false proxies, I can tell you that the Home and Youth Affairs Bureau and the Home Affairs Department attach great importance to the management of buildings. For every case that we see, perhaps in a news report, or we have received complaints about poor management of buildings, we would look into them closely. If we have authority by the law or conferred powers, we would follow up on them, or we would refer to relevant law enforcement departments. For example, if we thought there was something wrong with the bids, we would refer such cases to relevant law enforcement departments. We do have to tackle the root cause of the problem. If we can do anything in the interim, we'll definitely do something right now. Lastly, it would be me. Again, I would support government's efforts in facilitating building management and the post. I think we have faced great challenges with Chapter 344. Whenever there are issues with the management of buildings, there are many great challenges, and I think the government has done a lot before. Regarding Chapter 344, the public has called for amendments to the ordinance for a long time. If we can have a definition of large-scale maintenance projects, that's good. However, there are other proposed amendments with that. For example, having a 10% quorum, there's also an in-person voting requirement. Can you elaborate on that? Because many people are concerned for large-scale maintenance projects. Would it be better if there are more owners that can participate in that? Is it because you thought it would be hard to have that quorum that you changed it? Also, with regard to bid rigging, we shouldn't really rely on legislative amendments. We should have the help of law enforcement departments. However, for owners who are not as aware of this, perhaps we can have, I think before the Home Affairs Department has provided support for homeowners on this aspect. Can we perhaps have like sub-district management teams that can help them with that? In the PowerPoint, it was mentioned whether it was 20% or 10% quorum requirement. We are open to suggestions. The reason why we're having this change is that after consulting stakeholders, they would often have an incorporate meetings, and will owners have less motivation to participate in meetings? We would want owners to attend the meetings in person to show their concern about the large-scale maintenance project meetings. If the meetings cannot be held, well, owners may not be motivated to join another meeting. But we are, again, open to suggestions. We can perhaps increase the quorum back to 20% at the one suggested in 2017, or perhaps with 400 owners, whichever is lesser. We are again open to suggestions. As for the management of 3 new buildings, I would agree with what members said. That is the direction we're taking. Because if we only do something during general meetings, that would be too late. We would want to help owners in the daily management of the buildings to help them gain a better understanding of proper building management and to help owners of 3 new buildings with building management. That is the direction that we want to take. All right, so we do want the Bureau and Department to monitor the situation with regard to the quorum and other requirements. Well, I would welcome members' input on this. If you wish to maintain the 20% quorum requirement or other requirements, we would welcome members' input. We would incorporate that when we are submitting a draft bill for discussion. Well, Mr. Yu Pot-leung, I didn't want to ask this question, but I do want to say that again, I emphasize that I do support the recreation of the post because, as we said before, this long-standing issue of the management of 3 new buildings has always been there, and it is important to maintain building safety for such owners of such buildings. Regarding affairs of owners' corporations, it would rely on the voluntary participation of owners' corporations members. Before, we would rely on liaison officers from the Home Affairs Department to help with that. I believe they have provided much support. What is the role that they're taking, however? Can you elaborate more? Also, with regard to increasing the quorum to 20%, I do understand the reason behind that. But the thing is, some buildings have few units. If you are just setting a percentage, it may not be representative. So perhaps you can include the number of flats when coming up with the quorum requirement. For the duties of liaison officers, perhaps I'll let the director answer that. We have a total of 145 liaison officers providing support. They would attend general meetings if invited. They would also perform liaison work. They would provide training and support during general meetings so that owners corporation members would be more aware of what responsibilities they have under the ordinance. Actually, in the 2013 review committee member, it was discussed with regard to the tiered system, but it was thought then that would be too complicated, causing much confusion for owners. It would also cause hindrance with regard to decreasing owners' motivation to participate in such work. That's why the quorum requirement is maintained at 10%, because back then in 2013, it was said whether 10% should be applied or should there be a tiered system. But after that, we decided to maintain the 10% quorum requirement. But again, we are open to suggestions. If members or stakeholders should think that they should use the 2013 proposal instead, or perhaps we should use what we had in 2017, increasing the quorum requirement from 10% to 20%. We are open to suggestions. So it's not like what people have been saying. We are not as keen to tackle bid rigging in large-scale maintenance projects. That is a misunderstanding because these are what we've come up after discussions. As said earlier, we are open to suggestions because there are different type of buildings. Some may be harder to achieve in certain types of buildings. It's not hard to manage a building. It's not easy to manage a building. It's probably even hard to convene owners to attend general meetings. So we are open to suggestions from the sector and stakeholders. Of course, it's not just about amendment of the ordinance. I believe the Bureau is more than willing to take input from members and other citizens. Again, we have to ask members, are there any members that object to the proposed recreation of the supernumerary post to be submitted to the establishment committee for endorsement?
多謝各位議員。
I would like to take this opportunity to thank members. As I said at the beginning, in the past few months we have conducted dozens of consultation sessions, and it's not limited to within the session itself. We have had abundant discussions before and after these sessions. We've heard a lot of comments from members. That's why we have had a very smooth legislative amendment process, and I would like to thank everyone for their help. Thank you. Well, if there is no other business, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.